Hello, so much for joining me on this Work Redefined podcast. Now, Bridget and I, we go way back. We've been friends for a number of years, but on top of being really good friends, we always like to dream together a little bit. It always seems that Bridget and I come up with really exciting ideas. And so I'm just thoroughly excited for the thoughts and the ideas that will come out of this conversation today. Bridget, thank you so much for joining me. Do you mind telling our listeners a little bit more about who is Bridget? Who are you? What do you do? I'm sure our listeners would love to hear your path so far.
Sure. Oh, goodness, Kelsey, it's nice to chat with you. Okay, so this question has been tripping me up a little bit, this who is Bridget, because I've gone through a bit of a transition in my life recently, and I've always felt like I have to have it all figured out. So in order to have it all on paper and have it be official, but the truth is I recently went through a big transition in my life, left a job that I was ready to move on from and ready to dive back into my values and learn about things that I felt was just on my heart. So I'm in a transition phase and I'm proud of it. And I'm very excited about what's to come and very optimistic about the future. So, but because I'm a high flyer, I can't sit still. I have to do some things in the meantime. So in the meantime, I started my own consulting business called Evergreen Consulting. And it's a bit of a combination of things that I value, but then also ways that I found that businesses can really start to thrive in their own way. And that's through content. My most recent position was an editor role at a tech startup. And learned a lot from the experience, but ultimately I saw that if you have content as a foundation and can tie that into your message and the way you want to grow, your business is really off to success with some really deep roots about who they are and then what you can deliver value to for your customers, to your community. So I've really been leaning into that of this businesswoman in a whole new way of kind of redefining myself. And it's been an up and down journey. I'm not going to lie. There's some days that I feel like, what am I doing? I don't have this figured out. But ultimately, I'm proud of myself, and I've really leaned into where, what I need to feel whole, and what fills my cup as a modern working girl with a lot of passions and interests. I definitely would say I'm a multi-passionate individual. So picking one thing is a hard choice for me. But yeah, so that's a little bit about myself.
Well, Bridget, you touched on something about how this, you're proud of this transition. It's had its ups and downs. I'm curious, so far, are you able to pinpoint maybe the one or two biggest things that you've learned about yourself through this transition?
Well, one of them about myself is how much faith is a priority in my life. And in order to lean into a priority, it's also making time for that. So you can carve time into your day that also allows you to act on a priority. So, or I should say a value. So if your value is faith or your value is family, taking a hard look at your schedule of how much am I actually acting on that value. And this transition has allowed me to do that. So I've joined a Bible study with other awesome females doing great things in the Fargo-Moorhead area. And it's given me a lot of space to reflect. I think that's a huge one, by the way, for navigating burnout, is space to reflect. But then the other thing I've learned is that, when your brain has been shot, right? And, you put all your energy, you put all those eggs in a basket and you're right. You have a lot of feelings attached to it. You're going to mess up. Like you're going to have blunders where you just burst into tears someday, or you doubt yourself. Having those moments of feeling like I don't have it all together. and just letting it be, breathing through it and going, I don't have to be perfect. Who's saying I have to be perfect? I'm not answering to anyone right now. So it's just me. So that has been really a huge relief, quite honestly, of just realizing that some of those limitations I put on myself have been self-inflicted. They've been those boundaries, those bumpers on a bowling alley, they've been put up by myself. So one of the things that I would suggest, by the way, to anyone going through burnout is to assess where's your power level. How is your power level in your life? Is it off the roofs and I am just full charge, or am I kind of down here right now? And if your power level, your internal power meter, I should say, is low, what can you do to build that back up? Is it by saying no intentionally, or yes intentionally? Leaning into people, that community, those people that you love, that you haven't talked to in a long time. Like for me, I went and painted my aunt's house for a week because I love her and I like to paint, and I hadn't done it in a while, and it just felt so good to just see that I could bring value to someone in a different way. So anyway, we're not quite at the advice section of this podcast yet, but bonus one in there for you.
No, this is great advice. That's what this is for throughout. And it's interesting. Yeah, there are a couple things you said. I thought of like a battery. I know we've talked a couple times around like charging your battery. Is your battery on 10%? I know when my computer battery says warning, about to die, instead of pausing and going and plugging in my computer, 9 out of 10 times I start vigorously working to try to get as much done as possible until it dies, which then, like, what's the point?
Right.
Right, like if the computer's dead, I can't use it. And it's just like ourselves and our bodies, if we just push to the end and go until like we have nothing left and just fall on the floor, like what's the point?
Completely. Well, and a lot of times, I mean, I shouldn't say a lot of times, that's a generalization, but what I've noticed in patterns of women who tend to get to a place of burnout, just absolute utter exhaustion, they're really measuring themselves by their output. And we've talked about this in our own coffee chats before, is like measuring yourself with based on what you can produce. Like, my value is if I can produce 8 pieces a day on a regular basis for, in this case was a content environment, that means I got a gold star of that day, and sometimes there's flexibility that you can take with that. Sometimes there isn't. But anyway, so measuring yourself based on your output is kind of it's a dead end, really.
Why do you think we feel that need to measure ourselves based on our output?
Well, I mean, without getting too psychological, right? I think everyone has their own inclinations to things. But I think a lot of us are looking to the external world to say, okay, show me that I matter here. Show me that, that you need me too. So I think sometimes it's the internal and the external dichotomy where there's just not a balance between, the signals you're getting and your feeling to perform. I also think, from a lot of internal reflection, it can be a feeling of wanting to share your talents and express yourself as well. So sometimes it's like, well, if I produce high volumes, there's a better chance that someone's going to see that as valuable, see that as something that, so I don't know. I think I'm going here to say it's definitely externally motivated, a bit of a people-pleasing tactic as well.
Feeling like we need to please everyone around us. I think this might be a slight sidestep, but I'm coming back to what you said earlier about that faith foundation and how you went back to your values. Do you think that, or maybe I'm trying to think of how to ask this, why do you think we put our faith on the back burner? Do you think it has something to do with this external validation to be successful, that we just kind of stop maybe putting the things that matter first? I mean, why do we put faith, family, like there's a lot of things that typically we will say are important, but we don't show it in our actions. Why is that?
So one of the pieces that I leaned into during this time in my life was a book by Brene Brown called The Gifts of Imperfection. It's a great book for really any woman who maybe struggles with either overexertion or looking to outside sources for validation of self, of worthiness. And she talks about the 10, I don't want to say testaments, but it's guideposts. There we go. It's guideposts of wholehearted living. And it allows you to assess, are you leaning in too much to areas of your life that are external indicators, or are you acting on the things that truly align with your values? So I highly recommend anyone to check out that book, to also just look up on Google. There's beautiful illustrations of the 10 guideposts, print them out, put them on your desk, refer to them. But I'm bringing this up because sometimes there's that tendency to say, oh, I am all about faith, I'm all about family, but measuring yourself by, well, put your money where your mouth is. Have you been to church lately, or how have you acted on those things, or taking that time to really assess where does that meter fall. So I would highly recommend anyone read that book if they're looking to kind of pause and assess themselves. Am I living in a way that measures up to the woman I want to be? And actually in the book, faith and having a spiritual mindset was one of the key indicators for people who, Brene Brown found them to be wholehearted living. They had a foundation, a base of faith. They were acting on it on the regular. They were using that as a source of trust and a foundation for themselves.
And now I know you don't have the book right in front of you, so this might feel slightly like a quiz, but I'm curious, that phrase wholehearted living, I mean, that really captures my attention. Do you recall from your experience of reading that book, like, what does that mean to be living wholeheartedly?
Yeah, so I'm looking it up real quick because I do want to do her justice. So this one is, yes, this is exactly what I was looking for. Wholehearted living is not like trying to reach a destination. It's like walking toward a star in the sky. We never really arrive, but we certainly know we're heading in the right direction. Rather than saying my worth is measured by the 8 pieces of content it can pump out today, it's maybe more of a directional base. It's the steps that you're taking towards that better version of Bridget, that better version of self.
Can you read that one more time? I just got goosebumps. I want our listeners to hear that one more time, that quote.
Yeah, wholehearted living is not like trying to reach a destination. It's like walking toward a star in the sky. We never really arrive, but we certainly know that we're heading in the right direction. And I also, from a faith standpoint, it's similar in that way. A lot of times with faith, it's the ability to hope that that's what you're doing, to live in the possibility that maybe I'm not right, but I'm going to believe anyway. I'm going to think of this as it's a mindset. right? It's less about the absolutes of, well, I believe it this way. I think God is real, so therefore, it's a bit more of I'm going to believe no matter what. It's that undying truth and wholehearted approach.
Mm. Well, that's really cool because I know, yeah, I'm thinking in terms of a value standpoint and a faith standpoint, as humans, we're naturally broken. And it's interesting because the analogy of that start reminds me, we had Michaela Schell on our podcast probably about a month ago now. And she was talking about this analogy of you're walking through the forest and you're chopping down trees and brush, and you see the light at the end of the forest. And finally, you get to the end of the forest and you think you've made it. And then at the end of the forest, there's this mountain to climb. And I think that is being very similar as following this star, which is this concept that we're never going to quite get there. I mean, we always think that, hey, if I have that nicer car or that better house, or, marry that perfect person, or, we always think that the next thing is going to make us whole and make us happy and satisfied, when in reality, it seems like from all the women that we talk to, the only thing that can fill that hole in their heart is that faith and trust in God, and having some sort of foundation on who they are and what their values are and what their why is. Would you agree, Bridget?
I would. It reminds me of the story of Eve, when God is saying, I am all knowing, trust that I am all knowing. And she wants to be also knowing. She believed in a voice, the serpent in this case, to take the bite of fruit from the tree of knowledge. She did those things, but it was God that actually knew it all, and it's not up to her to know it all, because she's human, and she's beautifully made that way. But that story also sticks out to me because it reminds us that shame is not, we're not born with shame. Shame came after trying to know all the answers, and also going for the all of the knowledge that the world possessed through the tree of knowledge. And that story sticks out to me and reminds me of kind of this conversation, Kelsey, because as women, and just as humans in general, it's not up to us to have all the answers. Even though we want to so badly, we want to know that there's a mountain after the forest, so we can say, well, if I knew there was a mountain, I would have brought my hiking gear, but I didn't know. I brought my axe, and that's all I brought. But I think it's lots of tests, but it also thinking of them in a way that it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to be closer to God, to continue to further yourself, that depth of self, that awareness of self. And that leads into one point that we have talked about before, which is opportunity mindset versus deficit mindset too.
Yeah, let's go there. I mean, from a standpoint of opportunity mindset, I mean, if we have that shame and we know we're not perfect, we know we don't know all the answers, and we mess up along the way, how can we continue to live in more of that opportunity mindset?
Well, it's challenge. But I think at times remembering that the challenge was put there by someone who knows that you have gifts and talents to get through it. And he's also, it's challenging you in a whole new way, because you're meant to learn something from it. Like, for instance, I had an interview recently, because still hitting the ground running with job interviews and such. I had an interview, and it was hard. And I hit a point that I totally doubted myself, and I walked away very, frustrated and conflicted. And after a lot of reflection, I go, well, I learned a lot from this, did I not? Like, I learned how to answer the "what is your biggest weakness" question. I hate that question, because I'm like, no, I don't want to have any weaknesses. I have to be strong, and I can handle anything. Don't look at me in a bad light,
Right.
So that one, always trips me up. But there's going to be roadblocks in your way to help, because it's all about how you navigate them and what you learn from them once you pass them by, right? So
Absolutely. Well, and it's such a hard thing because we try, one of the things we kind of joke about, but it's really true, is you can't just think your way out of a rut, or like you can't just positive mindset your way out of a rut, right? If you're in a rut, it takes a lot more than just thinking happy thoughts. What insight do you have on that?
well, I mean, thinking happy thoughts, I love that, because I'm naturally very bubbly and like, oh yeah, everything's great. Rainbow sunshine, absolutely. Let's keep that going. But yeah, it is easy to just say the way out is an easy answer. But in reality, there's a lot of self-exploration that goes in with coming to a place of true deep confidence. And it's, to get there is, for a lot of people, going to be challenging. Like it's not, life isn't easy. It's meant to make you look at your life in all sorts of different ways, because we're beautiful that way. If I'm going to be rainbows again, we're beautiful in that way, that we have a lot of untapped potential and untapped ways of seeing the world. I mean, if I hadn't gotten to a point that I felt like I was so exhausted and I needed to make a choice for myself, who knows where I would be. But the thing was, I did, and I acted on that, and I got my power meter a little higher. And now I have a different perspective. I have a different perspective on how to expound your energy. What priorities, like measuring your actions with how do they stack up with your priorities. So challenges are not necessarily, don't forbade them. Don't run away from a good challenge, because you can really grow from it. It's uncomfortable as all heck, but I've never had a bad reflection from a hard situation, if you put it that way.
Well, and it's interesting because, yeah, we talked even at the beginning about what you've learned from this experience. And I think that it's so easy when we're in the valley of despair and we're exhausted and we're at our worst, how, we look back, and those are the times where we learned the most. And those are the things that shape us as humans. And I think of it in terms of like, I think people are you really have to lean on others and having that strong support system in order to help pull you out of that rut. Because truthfully, I mean, it's kind of like being stuck at the bottom of a well, right? Like you're in this deep, dark hole. Right. Someone might be coming along and trying to pull you up and pull you out. Even God is coming along, trying to pull you out of that rut, right? But you have to be willing to, grab the rope or climb out of that rut too. And so there's this give and take. And I think it comes from our relationships. It comes from God. It comes from the things that are surrounding us. But again, yeah, you can't just think your way out of being exhausted. You have to it takes time to heal. It takes time to lean on others. One of the things you mentioned again was that concept of reflection. I really think that might be something good for us to visit about as we get close to closing our conversation today. What is reflection? I mean, if you were to define reflection, what is it and how does it show up in your life?
For me, reflection is sitting with feelings that are normally uncomfortable and not judging them, not labeling them, not thinking it has to be an outcome because I'm having this feeling. I even sometimes do that where I'm like, I'm feeling angry, therefore this is all worth it, right? But sitting with the feelings, even when they're really uncomfortable, and feeling them and being angry. There's been sometimes I'm angry and I'm just, I feel it. I'm just like, it's just like, I'm there. I'm in that headspace. But I'd say writing all the time, am thinking. I had a mentor recently who talked about thinking. And it's kind of a silly part of my of my career where I felt like I was producing constantly and I was like on a deadline, and so I was coming to this mentor asking if they could help me with this deadline, and he was graciously willing to help, but he also said, one of the biggest talents and but biggest things that you can offer as a leader is your ability to think in the perspective that you can, like in your way, because you see things differently, and that's your value as a leader. So taking time to think, like truly think, like just pen to paper, make it time for you, and prioritizing that is so huge. And I think in modern society, I was in tech, you don't feel like that there's a balance to do that, but I really he's right, because as a leader your point of view is gold. Your challenges, your perspectives, how you see the world, it's what makes you uniquely you. And so prioritizing time that's just for that, if it's to be angry because I'm angry that I didn't get the position I wanted because I applied really hard and I worked really hard for it, be angry, think through the feelings. Why am I angry? Ask yourself why, contemplate, but also challenge yourself. Go do it. Do I have to feel like this? Is this a choice? Kind of having this internal war with yourself and going, it's okay. It's okay that I'm having this headspace. It's a safe place to have it. So that would be, my personal experience meets a bit of advice on navigating reflection.
I loved that concept of not judging your feelings, because we all have those feelings pop up, and I know that I've experienced them. I was really frustrated with someone yesterday, and I'm like, why am I frustrated? And after reflecting on it, I'm like, this is dumb. There's no reason for me to be frustrated about this certain situation. And it took me time though to just acknowledge the feelings and say, hey, it's okay that you're feeling this way. But then to also sort through it and realize that my frustration was maybe not valid. And in certain circumstances, it might be valid. But I love that thought of not judging yourself for having feelings, whether it's angry, sad, worried. Allow yourself to feel those feelings, and then from there really taking that time to ask yourself questions. And I love what your leader said about the power of being a leader. And that's sometimes a question I like to ask at the end is, what makes a great leader? And what I'm hearing is a great leader is someone who takes time to think so that they can offer up their own unique perspective. Mm-hmm. I think that's a very exciting way to view a leader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that one sticks with me, because it was so simple, but it also reinforces and puts value back on challenges that you've faced, unique things that you've learned, because we're walking through life all just trying to figure it out, right? That's a reminder that I always remind myself. Something I always remind myself is that we're all just doing the best we can. Even the ones that you look up to and the mentors in your life, they're also doing the best that they can, and they've also been through challenges, but they bring a perspective, and just like you do, and it's something about that, just even through transition has really developed a stronger sense of self for me. But I know we're getting close on time, but I was hoping to share those the 10 guideposts for wholehearted living.
Yeah.
I thought they'd be a nice closer, and I recommended reading if anyone is looking for a good book.
Yep, I want you to share those, and then I'll also put a link in our show notes as well. So I think verbally share them now. I think that would be great for us to hear them. Yeah. And for those who want to see them, I'll put a link in as well.
Yeah. So I should say, so the book is called The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown. And it actually just had a 10-year anniversary that she wrote this book. So the edition that I listen to, because I'm all audiobooks lately, I love a good audiobook. Was her reflections on 10 years ago when she wrote the book, and does she still feel like this is does it still resonate? And the answer, of course, was yes, but highly recommend if you're looking for that perspective to check it out. But so her 10 guideposts for wholehearted living that she found through quite a bit of research, interviews, her own self-reflection, were kind of categorized in 2 buckets. So you have the letting go of and then cultivating buckets. So there's kind of a pairing for each one. So I'll kind of go through them, with each pair at a time. So first one is letting go of what people think, and then cultivating authenticity. Second one is letting go of perfectionism, instead cultivating self-compassion. Third one is numbing and powerlessness. This is for all the girls that feel their bar is low. Maybe reach towards a glass of wine or anything to numb the pain. Scroll. So letting go of numbing powerlessness, instead cultivating a resilient spirit. Fourth one, scarcity and fear of the dark. So fear, huge one. Instead, cultivating gratitude and joy. So that one really resonated with me because it's the gratitude mindset, the opportunity mindset versus a deficit mindset. Letting go of need for certainty. And this plays into the faith aspect, cultivating intuition and trusting faith. I really like that chapter on leading need for certainty, even when it comes to in churches and by faith leaders and all of that, but instead cultivating intuition and trusting faith. The next one is comparison, letting go of comparison, and cultivating creativity. That one's also great because the comparing yourself, you can also just be you and wear what you want to wear and be who you want to be, and that's not a straight line, right? Letting go of exhaustion as a status. So that's productivity as self-worth. Big one that I was just talking about earlier is finding that self-worth, but exhaustion as a status. Oof, that one I felt. And cultivating play and rest. So how much do you play in life? And no, it's not necessarily like playing the Game Boy or playing board games. Maybe it is, but her example was dancing in the kitchen with her family, just because, and they would do that while they were doing the dishes and just be playful. Letting go of anxiety as a lifestyle, and instead cultivating calm and stillness. So mindfulness has been one that's really helped me through this transition of letting go of this constant anxiety of, I have to constantly produce in order to have worth, but instead making time for breathing. Silly, right? Just breathing, but taking time for intentional breathing, yoga, being still, looking outside, drinking that cup of coffee, and just being in your environment. Letting go of self-doubt and supposed to. Now we talk about this all the time, is supposed to. I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to be this way. I'm supposed to look this way. I'm supposed to, by I'm 25, I have this timeline. I'm supposed to meet that timeline. And instead, Brene Brown talks about meaningful work. So cultivating meaningful work instead, asking yourself those questions about, what are my gifts, my talents? How can I do things that add value to my life? might not be the supposed to route, but sure feels good to me. And then letting go of being always in control, always having to have a tight grip on everything. And instead cultivating laughter, song, and dance. I know, Kelsey, probably, I could see you just loving this one because you love to laugh and you love to dance. And I love your skills in violin and all those things. So, but leaning into that space of to cultivate that instead of always being in control. So that's the list.
Yeah. We're need to copy that and download it and give Brene Brown the credit and use that in some of our material. I love that. You have my thoughts spinning, and I think that's such a beautiful way to end, because we can send our listeners hopefully to that list as well and give them the opportunity to read it, live by it. I think those are such great things. And it's so hard for us to let go of things sometimes, right? But that concept of what can I let go of? And instead of holding on to these things, what can I cultivate? That positive spin on it is so beautiful.
Right. Because I mean, even just the language of, letting go of and cultivating rather than do and do not, it feels so finite. It feels so black and white. And letting ourselves create and be, it releases some pressure.
It absolutely does. No, I'm so glad that that's the note that we're ending on, because again, talking about burnout can sometimes be negative, but a lot of us experience it and experience that physical, mental, emotional exhaustion throughout our days. And so ending with that positivity of how can we just let go of some of these things? How can we play more, rest more, stop feeling like we have to control everything, and truly have hope that we're journeying towards that star. That's really going to stick with me today, Bridget. So thank you for joining us. My last question for you is just, how can our listeners be in touch with you? I mean, where can we find you? I'm sure some of our listeners might want to follow you on LinkedIn or social media, or look at your website or whatever. What would be the best way to be in touch with you?
Well, you can definitely reach me on LinkedIn. I love to meet new folks and stay connected that way. But I am also in progress of building my own, consulting site. So having an online presence, and that to come. But I'd say LinkedIn for sure is a good, easy route to get in touch.
Awesome. Well, and then I guess on that note, is there any way that we can help support you in your career journey and the work that we do, or the work that you do? How can our listeners support you, or what type of clients do you look to work with?
Yeah, so I'm really looking to help folks leverage content in a way that helps them meet their ideal audience. But looking at content as that foundation to connect mission as well. So one of the terms that I kind of think about is how creating content that lasts, building that foundation, that strategic foundation that you can lean on as a way to express your brand, a way to draw in like-minded people, like-minded buyers. So that's really what I'm looking for, is folks that are wanting to lean into their content strategy to deepen themselves as a company, and then also go through some strategy. So some strategic exercises where, take a look at what have you done before? What are you doing now? What would you like to do? How do those things match up? How do they not? What does the data say too about, are you reaching the audience that you need? How can you improve? Those are all sorts of questions that I go through with my clients. So that's really what I'm looking for to next. So I'd love to help anyone that's looking for a bit of compassionate support, and also someone that can help them meet their strategic goals. So
I've heard the phrase "content is king."
oh
That's
yes.
the phrase I've heard. So that's what that made me think of. Well, Bridget, thank you so much for your time. I'll let you go so you can get on with your day, but we're so appreciative. So many good nuggets. I definitely had goosebumps a couple times today. So thank you, thank you, thank you for all your wonderful insight today.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Kelsey.